Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Rabbi Sherry Greensteiner, the rabbi at Congregation Or Atid, and a board member at the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond. Today's program is the second of three-part speaker series on the crisis in Israel. This program is centered around interfaith. I join Marvin Daniel, Kathy Palatnik, the Coalition of Clergy Citizens Against Racism, as a host of this program. The Jewish Community Federation of Richmond offers this entire series with the leadership of Richard November, Helen Horowitz, Tommy Baer, Nanette Shore, and Josh Goldberg. As an Israeli, I know how much Israel needs your support at this difficult time. I was born and raised in a small moshav, a village called Moshav Yarachiv. All the members of my moshav, as is my family, are Jews who were airlifted to Israel from Yemen in 1949 during Operation Magic Carpet. I am also a very proud American, and I'm grateful to the Jewish community here in Richmond for standing by Israel and offering a program like this one and inviting voices to engage in interfaith dialogue to gain insight and perspectives from beyond the Jewish community. Today is a special day in our calendar, in the Jewish calendar, as we celebrate the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. Our tradition relates to this day as Rosh Hashanah La'ilanot, the new year for the trees, considering this day as the marking date for a tree's age for the harvesting and the tithing of its fruit. Tu B'Shvat is also known as the Jewish Arbor Day, where our attention is directed to nature and we participate in the action, the mitzvah of planting trees. Our sacred texts often compare a person to a tree. The prophet Jeremiah tells us that a righteous person shall be like a tree planted by waters, sending forth its roots by a stream. It does not sense the coming heat. Its leaves are ever fresh. It has no care in a year of drought. It does not cease to yield fruit. Tu B'Shvat reflects our connection to the earth and to our land. It reminds us that we, like the trees, need soil, air, water, and sun to survive. It reminds us that we too are dependent, and without God's provisions, we should not survive. It reminds us that we, like trees, have a purpose and utility in this world. It is now my pleasure to call on Reverend Reuben Boyd from 3rd Street Bethel AME Church to say a few words.
Thank you, Rabbi. First of all, let me just give a brief description of what Clergy and Citizens Against Racism is. It is a group of clergy and citizens that cross racial, denominational, and faith lines to fight against all forms of racism and hate. With that said, now let us pray. Eternal God, our Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this opportunity to gather across the various lines of faith. We recognize, O God, that you are the creator of all mankind. With every breath, we share this world together. Help us to understand our connection and strive for the peace and love that should exist. Almighty God, we stand in awe of your goodness, mercy, and power. So we invite you to be a part of this gathering. May you get the glory out of all that is said and done during this time. This we ask and say amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend.
You're welcome.
Will now hear from IDF spokesperson Kelly Otis, who will offer an update on what is happening on the ground.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for hosting this event. And I think it's so important that in times like these, we really do pray for peace and that we really do, get together and really dive deeper into what is going on the ground and really try and understand as much as we can so that wherever it needs to be to spread the message or to help, that we know what we're up against, and being armed with the information is always the best way to go forward. So I'll give a little bit of a brief update. As you know, the IDF is defending Israel and Israeli civilians on all fronts, from the south, from the north, from Judea and Samaria. This is the Holy Land, a land of multiple faiths. We have the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, and many, many others, Druze, so many religions and so many faiths, but Hamas, they do not differentiate. Whoever is found in Israel is a target for them, and they do not want the existence of the state of Israel. So we are fighting a very difficult battle in a very urban combat ground, something that has not necessarily been seen on this level anywhere around the world, in fact. And so I would like to just start with a few updates on what's really happening inside Gaza, and then we'll move a little bit to the north. So it's been a very sad week for the IDF. One heartbreaking day, which happened to be the hardest day for the IDF since the war began, which was when we lost 21 soldiers in a heartbreaking attack when the soldiers were trying to, dismantle terrorist infrastructure, and unfortunately were caught by Hamas terrorists shooting RPGs. This incident, our hearts are with the families, and our whole country is mourning, but we cannot let it distract us. The cost of war is so high, but we still have a lot to do, and we have not yet finished. So our forces are staying with high morale, and they're continuing on as is their mission. So I'll just talk a little bit about what the strategy is at the moment, because we've gone through various stages of this war, and the current stage is that our forces are currently operating in the areas of Khan Yunis. This is an area that is very highly populated, and so it makes the combat very, very complicated and slow. The whole point of what the IDF is doing now is slow and precise maneuvering according to intelligence, to make sure that we do not harm any civilians or any people who are not involved in Hamas. The whole purpose of the slow maneuvering within the populated areas is so that the IDF are sure that when they are targeting a Hamas terrorist. And what complicates this is the fact that Hamas terrorists are operating within hospitals, within holy sites like mosques, from within schools, and the tunnel infrastructure underground is really extensive. In fact, on last Saturday, we revealed a tunnel system that was over 1 kilometer wide that has evidence that Israeli hostages were held within that tunnel. And they're coming up from all over the ground, almost 360 degrees, surrounding our forces, shooting from when the challenge for an IDF soldier is that a Hamas terrorist will be clothed in civilian clothing. He will be inside a hospital, and while a IDF soldier is walking outside, from within the hospital, they would throw an RPG or start throwing mortar shells at the IDF soldiers from outside the hospital. Now, this complicates the situation immensely, as firstly, they are in civilian clothing. So from first glance, the soldiers have to be very, very precise in how they deal with this. They are trained to identify who is suspicious and who is a civilian. And then once they're in a hospital, it is very hard for IDF soldiers to, gain their legitimacy to attack them. However, whatever terrorist infrastructure is used for terrorist infrastructure, that immediately removes the protected status. And so just imagining this combat ground in a highly urban populated area is a very tough battle zone for these soldiers. So that is what they're facing in the south. And unfortunately, 217 soldiers have fallen within Gaza Strip in action. And the amount of injured soldiers is around 2,600. But never mind all the fighting and the combat, one thing that has remained consistent is the humanitarian aid that is going to the population of Gaza. There has currently been around nearly 10,000 trucks of humanitarian aid, food, medical supplies, vaccinations coming into the Gaza Strip. And in fact, there was actually a few days in the past month where the amount of food coming into the Gaza Strip was even more than would come in before the war started in the first place. The IDF is open to let in as much aid that is needed that can be provided by the United Nations. Until now, the United Nations have been providing around 100 and not more. But if they were to provide more, the IDF will assist transitioning and bringing all that in. There is no limit to the amount of aid that is able to come in. So unfortunately, we're facing situations where Hamas terrorists are stealing the aid or trying to capture the aid and be responsible for the distribution. This is problematic, as if they are responsible for the distribution, we're not sure if it can really get to the people of Gaza. And so we are trying to assist the way of this aid to make it to the right people in the right hands. Unfortunately, this is not all in the IDF's control. And just a little bit about the north. We are facing ongoing attacks, anti-tank missile attacks, rocket launches from right next to UN facilities. It is clear that Hezbollah are violating all the resolutions. The UN resolution 1701 has been violated. There have been around 7 civilians and 9 soldiers killed on the northern border, which in all sense of the word is actually considered war level. However, we are being very targeted in our response. We are only targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, incoming rockets that we see. Anything that can harm the state of Israel will be eliminated. And we are really praying for a diplomatic solution. So we are talking to our partners to help Hezbollah understand that going to war with Israel is not in the interest of their organization and not in the interest of Lebanon and the people of Lebanon, especially not for the sake of Hamas. And so Israel does not want a war in the north, but we need to return our citizens. At the moment, there are 80,000 Israeli civilians who are still displaced for 3 months, living in hotels, as it is too dangerous for them to be in their homes. So once this is a tremendous, step that we need to be able to return our Israeli citizens to their homes. And as said throughout the war, which is still the purposes of this war, is to defeat Hamas so that they have no political governance and no military governance over the Gaza Strip, and to bring back all 136 hostages who are still stuck inside Gaza. And we are not yet able to get access to them, not through the Red Cross, not through any international organizations. So let's just, people of faith, please keep them in your hearts and in your thoughts, that they may have a safe return. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
We will take a few minutes for questions. If you would like to ask a question, please unmute and ask your question.
We've heard a lot on the news about Israel beginning to move towards the Rafah gate, and where they've, told civilians to evacuate. Do you have any information on that?
So the IDF has requested from all civilians to evacuate from the areas of combat, as we know that the target of the IDF operations is not civilians. Along the way, there were very many reports of Hamas stopping civilians from evacuating and actually leaving them in the north. And this was very problematic that the IDF, we spent weeks and weeks before we actually entered ground troops into Gaza in order to facilitate this evacuation. The problem is that Hamas's tactic is to hide amongst its population. This is such a complicated task because we do not want to target the population. If Hamas would come out from out of the tunnels, our soldiers are above the tunnels. It is too dangerous for them to go inside. We don't know how to act in those tunnels. It's not known territory. So our soldiers are above ground, and theirs are hiding beneath. And it's really until we can protect the citizens of Israel, we cannot stop this war. And so it is a complicated battle in these populated areas. But one thing that is for sure is that every commander on the ground has been trained by international law experts, by, you know, intelligence experts on who they are targeting, what they are looking for, and whether they actually are a threat or not a threat. And so far, you know, unfortunately, any tragedy and any civilians killed is not in any way something that the IDF wants, and is actually, we really see it as a tragedy when there is collateral damage, and we always take steps after incidents to learn on how to be better. But one thing that we can't compare is Khan Yunis and Rafah city and are not the same as Gaza city, and it's not the same as the northern parts of Gaza. And we are learning along the way how to deal with the situation, but there are much more populated areas, and therefore our maneuvering is much slower. This is our reaction. We are much more concentrated, using intelligence and all means necessary in order to not just, you know, airstrike, but rather using forces, human eyes on the ground who can really make that human decision.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm not sure it's a fair question. I certainly understand the density of Gaza. I've been there. But with the intelligence capacity of Israel, why has it been so difficult to locate the tunnels, and specifically the tunnels in which the hostages are being held?
Well, you know, I think that the IDF has had a lot of information about the tunnel system for a very long time. I remember in the previous war in well, it was an operation, Guardian of the Walls, we did announce the Hamas metro system, the tunnels underneath Gaza, and it was apparent to the Israeli sources that for many years Hamas were investing billions or millions into these tunnel systems. And I think the challenge is that, you know, every strike that the IDF makes and every move that the IDF makes, they have to consider implications on hostages. And this is it's a slow process, unfortunately, and it is unknown territory. The IDF did not fully know the depth of the tunnel system. And this is, you know, something that is obviously going to be looked in going forward, the intelligence capabilities. But just having the intelligence doesn't necessarily lead us to the right solutions on the ground. We could probably have the intelligence, but physically on the ground will not be able to make any maneuvers due to many different constraints and the safety of forces and the safety of Palestinian civilians. And so there's so many complications that come into these assessments. Any time that the IDF forces are able to make steps in order to try and save hostages, they will do so. And in order to locate tunnels, we've actually destroyed around 1,000 tunnel shafts at this point. 1,000 is a lot, and we don't think it's near the end. So as we continue to go deeper into Khan Yunis and Rafah, then we will see even more tunnel shafts. But just destroying 1,000 tunnel shafts coming from residential homes and schools and next to mosques is a very significant feat for such a small place and such a dense place.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? My name is Leah, and I have some comments. As far as the intelligence, the communication of Hamas now, it's an old-fashioned one. It's not the new one. So they do it by writing notes, old-fashioned phone. So it's really hard to detect. That's number one. Number two, there was a few days ago, there was a bombing in an UNRWA facility. And now what I understand from the news that there's actually investigation to see if actually the rocket that fell there, it's actually not Israelis, but from Hamas. So that's number two. Number three, what I want to mention, which really bothers me with the local news and the international news, whenever they talked about casualty in Gaza, they talk about like 1,000 and 10,000 kids and children, but they don't mention the fact that this is by Hamas report. And they tend to exaggerate, and they tend to make the numbers looking really bad. And I think people need to understand that this is come with Hamas report. So it's not really reliable.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Regarding the UN facility, I can say that at the time, at this present moment, the IDF, because we are an authority that produces, reliable sources, we have to make sure that every investigation we do is thoroughly investigated. And at this point, we have investigated that there has not been any aerial strike near a UN facility, and we are checking the other incidents that could have happened. But at this point, we are also indeed checking the possibility that it was a failed rocket from Hamas. This is not something that we haven't seen before. This is a result of many, many Palestinian injuries and deaths from failed mortar fire. In fact, yesterday there was a video of a Hamas terrorist shooting mortar fire towards Israeli soldiers, and you can actually hear children playing in the background. So that just shows you the proximity of these attacks towards the civilian population. And regarding the Hamas numbers on casualties, so I have to agree with you. This is infuriating, to have the only authority in the Gaza Strip being Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry. And in fact, we know that since the start of October 7th, anyone who has died, whether they've died from heart attacks or natural causes, or and sadly over the course of months, people die, and it's an unfortunate reality of the cycle of life. But those people have also been put into this death toll from the Israeli forces. It's not fair. The numbers, what we can say is that 9,000 terrorists have been killed, around 2,300 have been arrested, and around 8,000 have been injured, which means close to 20,000, around 19,000 are out of commission of Hamas's forces. We still have to go. We still have the leaders of the organization. We have not captured them yet, and there are still battalion commanders that the IDF will not stop until we have destroyed Hamas's ability to attack Israel. But for sure, the numbers game is infuriating. It's upsetting. I think some media outlets have finally put next to their numbers that it is a Hamas-run ministry. This was not the case in the beginning of the war and actually in the previous wars. So at least we have made some headway with letting that out to the world. We just hope that eventually, once Hamas is gone, there will be more appropriate and reliable Palestinian sources that could report the truth going forward.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you, Kelly, for the information. And we just wish all the best to our soldiers in Israel.
Thank you.
Unmute. Good afternoon now, everyone. I am so pleased that today we have with us Mohammed Durashe. He is a Shalom Hartman Institute faculty member and director of planning, equality, and shared society at Givat Haviva Educational Center. He previously served as co-director of the Abraham Fund initiatives and as elections campaign manager for the Democratic Arab Party and later the United Arab List. Mohammed is considered a leading expert on Jewish-Arab relations and has presented lectures and papers at the European Parliament, NATO Defense College, World Economic Forum, and Club de Madrid, U.S. Congress, Herzliya Conference, and Israel's Presidential Conference. He was the recipient of the Peacemakers Award from the Catholic Theological Union and the Peace and Security Award of the World Association of NGOs, and was Leadership Fellow at the New Israel Fund. In 2008, Mohammed Durashe was elected as a city council member in his hometown, Iqtal. In 2009, he served as a member of the National Committee, which drafted Israel's coexistence education policy. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a Master of Arts in Public Administration from Hartford University. He lives in Iqtal with his wife and 4 children. Professor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Marvin. Great honor to be with you, and I wish that we were meeting in better times. Actually, I will start maybe with a small story, although I know that my time is limited, but I think it tells a lot. October 7th, 8:15 a.m., I get a call that my cousin is missing. Awad Darawshi, he was a paramedic that served at the party, at the Supernova party, as an ambulance driver. He was stationed there from Thursday, not Saturday. And when I spoke to him Friday, I asked him how's being at such a party, and he said he was treating spoiled girls that were scratching their legs with the thorns in the desert, one that overdosed and he had to evacuate her to hospital, and couple that had too much to drink the night before. Those were the issues that he was dealing with. 8:15, he went missing. We got a phone call that he was injured by the Hamas attack. We tried to figure out what happened to him. Actually, for a few days, we didn't know. It took 6 days until we discovered what actually happened to him. On the 4th day, we had to provide the DNA samples, so we started fearing the worst, and the pieces of the story started coming. The team, there were 6 paramedics and ambulance drivers stationed there in the party. The 5 of them decided to evacuate the scene after the first wave of attack, which was mostly missiles. He decided to stay. His answer was, you go, to his Jewish fellow team members. He said to them, you go, I speak Arabic, I think I can manage. They started running away, and the shooting was getting closer, and when they looked back a couple of 100 yards, they saw him getting shot. And when his body was evacuated 3 days later, because everyone was afraid that bodies will be booby-trapped, so they couldn't evacuate the bodies for a few days. They found him in his hands. He still had the bandages, which he didn't have time to put on his Jewish fellow partygoers. And he died as a true martyr of war. As a true selfless person. For us, he represented the values of the family, that you're supposed to be selfless and give your life for the good of people. And so since then, we are trying to carry his message and continue his message. His funeral turned into a Jewish-Arab joint event with tens of thousands of people. On his grave, there was a Muslim prayer, which is our family religion, but there was also a Jewish prayer. They read Kaddish. Rabbis came to read Kaddish over him. But that tells the story of 36 Arab citizens who were killed also on that day. Mostly Bedouins and medical staff, people that were trying to save their fellow countrymen, their fellow Jewish citizens that were going where they knew before, and they were putting them in their trucks and trying to evacuate them under fire. Not many made it, some did make it, and they made one truckload and went back to take another truckload until they got killed themselves. So this created an interesting chapter in Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. I'm going to talk about Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. I'm not going to talk about Gaza, not about the West Bank, not the Israeli-Palestinian big conflict, which I'm too little to say I know what's the solution of it is going to be. But I'm going to talk about the internal story of Jewish-Arab relations, which has gone through some challenges since 1974. Some of the challenges are political, where we still have a debate. I would characterize it, whose state is it? Is it the state of the Jews, or is it the state of the Israelis? If it's the state of the Jews, it leaves all the diaspora Jews outside the legitimacy of the state. If it's the state of, if it's the state of the Jews, it leaves me as outside the legitimacy of the state, as if the state disowns me as a citizen. I'm 27th generation in the town I live in, which is the town I was born in, the town of Ixal. And the state says to me, in that case, I'm not your state. And if it's the state of the Israelis leaving the Jewish diaspora out, then the state disowns its Jewish diaspora and basically loses some of the, in either way, you lose one of the two promises of the Declaration of Independence, where the state did want to say that it is the nation state of the Jewish people. And in the same Declaration of Independence, it spoke about integration of Arab citizens as politically and socially equal. That is the promise of the Declaration of Independence. So there is a debate that is not resolved right now. The extreme right wing is trying to pull it to the extreme definition that the Jewish nature is above the democratic nature of the state. The liberal camp is trying to argue the exact opposite. This is one of the themes that we've been hearing in the last year about the judicial reform. Which are the stronger values in Israel? Is it the Jewish religious ethnic nature, or is it the civic liberal legal nature? So the status of Arab citizens is one of the fabrics, or one of the components of this debate. It actually started in 2018, 19th of July, with the passing of a law called the Nation State Law, that the liberal camp in Israel and the Arab citizens call it as anti-democratic, and some would go as far as calling it racist. The right wing, who passed it with a very narrow vote of 61 versus 59 seats in the Knesset, calls it essential for Israel's existence. Debate which is still open, and we're not getting any progress in that direction. Where we are having progress is in the second concept that the Declaration of Independence spoke about. It spoke, as I said, about political equality, which is debatable now, and it spoke about social equality. And in social equality, we're actually able to now identify many what I call islands of success in Jewish-Arab relations. One of them is the story of Awad, which is, it's not just the story Awad, my cousin. It's not just story of one individual, but it's a story of the medical system in Israel. Although Arab citizens are 17% of the citizens, and when you add East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, then the Arab population, meaning also adding the citizens and the residents, becomes 21% of the population. But the Arab citizens, who are 17% of the population, are a third of the medical staff in Israel. And in the crisis time right now, when many Israeli Jews are recruited to the military, 40% of the medical staff in Israeli hospitals, 40% are Arab citizens. That is 24% of the doctors. That's almost 50% of the nurses. That's almost 44% of the dentists and 55% of the pharmacists. This is an island of success of integration of Arab citizens, where the Arab citizens built capacity, medical skill capacity, and the Jewish population created space. And this is what we call a win-win relationship. It's a great deal of interdependency that has evolved over the years. Another island of success that I will identify is the academic arena. If I go back with you to 2023, the percentage of Arab students in Israeli universities was 3.5%, only 3.5%. Today, 20 years later, we're talking about 20% of the student population. We're talking about 23% of the engineering students, and which tells you that the evolution of the high-tech industry is going to happen. Just 7 years ago, the percentage of Arab employees in high-tech industry was 1%. Today, it's 7%, but 23% of the engineering students. So it is there is an evolution that is happening. It's not the same story in the finance industry, which is, we call it an island of failure. Only 3% of Arab students are in the finance industry. Now, because of time limitations, I have a tendency of speaking forever, but because of time limitations, I'm going to get to a couple of additional points, if you would allow me, Marvin. I run an organization called Givat Habiba. I will also share with you right now something on chat that you can look into more details, just in order to save time, so you can save this link. We found ourselves in an interesting situation. Our institution teaches peace education. It's the first peace education institution in the Middle East. We won the UNESCO Prize for Peace Education, the only organization in the Middle East that has ever got that kind of quality assessment. And in regular times, we bring Jewish and Arab youth, usually for their first ever encounter. We use 3 different theories social contact theory, which is supposed to humanize the other. Usually kids come for their first ever encounter with the other. For 93% of the kids that come to us for our campus, it's their first time ever. And we manage in this encounter to reduce stereotypes and racism from an average of 65, 68% to somewhere around 12%. All what it takes is 3 days of intervention to reduce the level of racism if you engage the kids in the humanization process where they can really start seeing the other as a human being. The second theory we use, it's called the narrative and identity debate theory. We allow the elephant in the room. We talk about the differences, and we allow ourselves also to agree not to agree. We still have different views about a lot of historic issues, a lot of narrative issues, a lot of identity issues that need to be maybe evolve into, maybe shared narrative in the future. We're not there yet because we still live under the atmosphere of an active conflict. So we're not post-conflict that we can develop a mutual narrative, but it's important to have a proper dialogue, cultural dialogue, where you can also share differences in a respectful environment. But most of our focus is on what we call the mutual interests theory, identify mutual interests, build mutual interests, whether it is collaboration between neighboring Jewish and Arab municipalities, whether it is cooperation on environmental activity, whether it is students at university working on the same research, or in their work centers. We're now working, trying to reduce damage to Jewish-Arab relations in work centers. You would see in the link I shared with you also some very scary data that shows there's a great deal of polarization and mistrust that has increased, almost doubled over the last 3 months. But despite the hard emotions that are there, we're managing to keep it without violence. We're managing to keep relations as debate over the issues, as a cultural debate over the issues, and not slide off towards the violence, despite some attempts from Hamas to drag Arab citizens into direct confrontations. And they've been calling to Arab citizens to engage in the war. I've said it, and we all say it. We don't want to be part of this war. We don't want to engage in war. The Israeli citizens, Jewish citizens we live with are tomorrow's fellow citizens after the war. So we're not willing to sacrifice what we built over the last 75 years. Yes, there are issues to debate, but we're not going to debate them in the streets during the war. On the other end, you have people like the Minister of Internal Security, Ben-Gvir, who's trying to also incite for this kind of escalation and tension, because he wants to increase his political career on this issue. And luckily, there are enough people, including Israel's president, who came to our conference 2 weeks ago and spoke against this kind of incitement. For the time being, we're managing to contain the situation. Sorry, I maybe lasted for a couple more minutes beyond my time.
No, Professor, you were right on the time there. It was perfect. We use the same procedure we did last time. If you have questions for Professor Doresh, you can put them in the chat, or if you just want to unmute and ask a question, that will work as well. So are there any questions?
If there are no more questions, I can extend for a couple more minutes.
Please do.
So I'll tell you another story. On October 8th, I was trying to figure out what's happening with my cousin, the guard in my organization. We are, we're the biggest organization in this field. The guard calls me at 8:30 Sunday morning, and he says, "I have a situation." So what's the situation? What worse news can I get? And he says, "I have here 13 individuals, 3 Jewish families from the Ashkelon area, from the surrounding, and they want a place to stay. We have dormitories usually in which we put Jewish and Arab youth when they come for those encounters." And I said, "Go ahead, take them in." The next day, we got, they told their families in the Ashkelon and the Gaza surrounding or Gaza envelope area. The next day, the 13 became 130, and within 4 days, it was 260 people, mostly women with their children. Husbands were in the battlefield, recruited to the military, and they didn't want to stay in the front line. And now we're finding ourselves Jewish and Arab staff of the organization. We have also a mixed school of Jewish and Arab students on our campus. We have 260 evacuees knocking on our door. What do you do? So yes, luckily we have a dining room. So food we can give them. Housing, very basic, two layers of beds and 6 people in a room. So we gave every family one bedroom like that. And we started finding that those were people completely traumatized. They were shaking. They came without clothes, just what they had on themselves. So we started, instead of being facilitators of Jewish-Arab dialogue, we started giving basic services of taking their laundry to our homes, bringing it the next day, and then having to buy laundry machines, and then to try to raise money to pay for the psychological therapy and for social workers, and buying them, newer clothes and blankets and things like that. And they stayed with us for 3 months. They stayed until the 29th of December. And we went into this out of zero thinking about what it means to us or what's the implication on us as an organization. I told my staff, most likely we will not have salaries next month, but this is what we're going to do. And luckily, we were able to raise all of the expenses. The total cost was $873,000 over 3 months. And we were able to cover all of that thanks to some foundations and federations, including the New York Federation, including the Boston Federation, Cleveland Federation. A few institutions really came and stood behind the minus account we had. So we were able to also pay our staff, but it was Jewish and Arab staff that cared for them for 3 months, and those evacuees continued to come to visit. Even this week, they came to visit us.
Professor, thank you so much. Is there anybody that has come up with a question that they wish to
I do have a question from Mr. Darausha. What is the support that you see for your initiative and your work in the Arab street and in the Jewish street?
Well, in good times, in bad times, you can see the link I shared here. In general, in good times, almost 68% of the Israeli Jewish public supports the notion of shared society, and about 85% of the Arab public in Israel supports the notion of shared society. Now, there's a bit of a difference. When we speak about the concept of shared society, we have 2 components, Rabbi. One is good relations that we want to develop between the communities, and the other is equality, because there is inequality between Jewish and Arab citizens in Israel. And we cannot just have coexistence of unequals as you have between a horse and a rider, where you basically maybe enjoy each other's company and you drink from the same river, but you maintain that kind of hierarchy. So we integrate the concept of equality when we speak about shared society. So it's not just coexistence, it's shared society that includes equality. Now, most Jews would say, let's start with good relations first, and the result will be equality. Most Arab citizens see the opposite dynamic. They say, let's start with equality, and this leads ultimately towards good relations. Our perception in this field is that these are 2 parallel tracks. You need to go one step at a time in these 2 tracks. We need to speed it as much as possible. I would dare say that the support among the public is much higher than the support among the politicians. The support among government, bureaucrats, not politicians, not elected officials. The support among government bureaucrats is probably 5 times more than the current government that we have. Unfortunately, I must admit that we're probably going through the worst government that you could have expected in regards to Jewish-Arab relations in Israel. Luckily, we still have some anchors of social and political leaders that support the work, like President Herzog himself, that came 2 weeks ago and gave us his name and auspices as the Presidential Conference on Shared Society. And I think today he does represent the mainstream in Israeli Jewish society. Yet, what you'll see in the material in the poll that we just conducted 2 weeks ago, Professor Manu Geva from Midgam Institute is a very leading pollster. He was the researcher that collected the data, so it's very authentic data. It shows that the situation is twice harder than what it was before October 6th. For me, it means that October 7th, for me, it means that my work is cut out for me, maybe twice more after the war. It's going to be very, very difficult to restructure and heal Jewish-Arab relations in Israel because of the damage being accumulated. Right now, we're not that busy with healing. Right now, we're mostly busy in damage control and reducing the damage. Go ahead, Mr. Marvin.
There is a question in the chat, and it's from someone who had a question in the chat the last time and did not get it asked. So let's, the question is, what is your suggestion of the best way to advocate for peace at this time of war?
Well, I'm glad that Jim wrote the word peace with a small p, not with a capital P. Jim, I go before more moderate terminology than peace. I call it pieces of peace. I don't know what's the solution for the capital P peace. I don't know. Some would say 2 states, some would say 1 state, some would say 3 states. I don't know. I'm lost already. I used to think that the 2-state solution is the best solution. I do think that the 1-state solution is not the best solution. So I'm lost in this case. What I know is I can bring every week 300 kids, 150 Jewish, 150 Arab. They come in with a high level of fear and high level of stereotypes, and they leave better human beings, less fear and more trustworthy, more trusting of the other. I know how to place Arab teachers in Jewish schools and Jewish teachers in Arab schools. When I started with this project in 2005, everyone said I'm crazy, that this is not going to work. Today, I have 2,500 cross-sector teachers. And they cover about 20% of the Jewish educational system and 20% of the Arab educational system. I know to identify Arab women who have never worked before because there are no workplaces in Arab towns and villages, give them training, connect them with Jewish employers, and create a win-win relationship. When I started this project in 2007, only 17% of Arab women worked. Today, it's 42% of Arab women working. That is almost 25% additional Arab women in the workplace. That's about a quarter of Arab families that have jumped from being below poverty line to above poverty line. So that's what I advocate for: pieces of peace, scholarship for a student, job training for a woman, breaking stereotypes with kids. And I think the accumulated sum is what's going to get us somewhere.
Thank you so much. The phrase "pieces of peace" is one that I will certainly borrow from you because it does describe peace without the capital P. Thank you so much for being with us. We've enjoyed having you. And now we're going to go to a different part of the program, which I think, Brad, can you split the screen with me and with Kathy? There we go.
Hello.
Hey, this is, Kathy and I have just gotten back from Israel. She was reminding me that a week ago today, we were flying home. It was a very quick trip. We were there 3 nights and 4 days, and we were back home. People are asking me, tell me about your trip. And my answer is I'm still trying to process it. I was telling somebody earlier that it's like I'm working with 3 baskets. Mm-hmm. And I've got a basket of really horrible, unmentionable, inconceivable stuff. I've got a basket of some hopeful stuff, and I've got this other basket in the middle that's just full of stuff that I'm trying to figure out. And but Kathy, you want to tell a little bit about what we did and where we went and that sort of thing?
Well, we first went to the south. We went to Kibbutz Be'eri. A resident there took us on an 1.5-hour tour and told us some stories that would curl your hair if it's not already curly. We went to the site of the Nova Festival, which has really been turned into a field of memory. Posters of all of the people who lost their lives there, people doing Kaddish, people. We were there, a group, I guess, of yeshiva students came through and were singing, and it was, it happened to be a beautiful day and what would have been a lovely sight were it not for all of the destruction that occurred before we were there. You know, you don't want to hear a blow by blow of everything we did, but I will tell you the things that concerned me the most are, you know, one of the things we did was help a farmer care for his strawberry crop. The labor force that he was used to, primarily Palestinian and Thai, does not exist any longer. And this is something that faces businesses across the state of Israel. Workers that they were relying on for all kinds of help cannot come and be there as far as the Palestinians are concerned. Others may come back if the war, you know, proceeds in a way that makes it safe for them to do so. But it has a tremendous economic impact. And we were staying in a lovely hotel in Tel Aviv. They have lost so much business that every night when we came back to our room, they had placed gifts on our bed to thank us for being there, but also I think to use up some of the stuff that they would have ordinarily been selling to other patrons. And it's frightening that this war has more than just human toll. It has a terrible economic toll. And I read in the New York Times yesterday that Israel's neighbors, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt, are also suffering economically. So it's a multifaceted tragedy.
It is. I think Kathy's right. We don't want to, you do not, trust me, want us to tell you step by step about our trip. It was, I will tell you that they are so incredibly grateful for Americans and American aid. And as you see our aid to Israel being held up in Congress, it is disheartening because they are so glad to say, oh my God, you're coming here during this time. That's unbelievable. But what your government has done for us is unbelievable. So that was gratifying. I can tell you that, people say, what do you think is going to happen? A little bit like Professor DeRocha, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you the Israelis are not going to stop. And everybody says, why don't they just stop, take a break? They're not going to do that. This is an existential question for them. This is, they really believe that this is the greatest risk to the Jewish homeland, a homeland for the Jewish people that has ever been, and they are treating it as such. And they are not going to stop. Now, whether you judge that right or wrong, I'm just telling you that was across the board the message that we got. Somebody mentioned, I think the professor, that there are 80,000 displaced people from either the north or the south that are living in hotels.
Altogether, Marvin, there were 200,000. 80 of them are from the north, and 120,000 from the south.
So there's 200,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Displaced people living in hotels. They want to go home, but they can't go home. I mean, some of their homes are not damaged, and they would like to go home, but they will not go home until it's safe. This is, a lot of people, we would say, when they got up on that morning of the 7th, they were not initially shocked at all the rockets, because the rockets are every day. The rockets go to Ashkelon, the rockets go to Sderot, and they go get in the safe room, and then they all clear sounds, and then they come out and go to work or whatever. But this time it didn't work that way. No. But the day that they have to live that way every day anyway is there's just going to be no more of that. They're not going to put up with it anymore. These people deserve to live in peace, is what they're saying. I certainly don't have all the answers, but it is a very sobering experience to be over there right now. I know other people on the screen have just been there. I think we're going to send another group from Richmond in March. And it is, and by the way, I want to mention while Kathy and I are on the phone, on the screen, one of the reasons we went is so that we could come back and tell this story. So if you belong to a congregation, a book club, a neighborhood group, and you would like to have a speaker come and tell you about our trip, please do. I've got 3 churches I'm going to already that have called and asked me to speak. Please use the resources that are available to you. That's why we went. So I just want to bring that up while we're on the screen.
Yeah, there were 6 of us from Richmond, so you have choices of people that could come and share
You're
their
not, you're not
experience.
stuck. You're not stuck with us. There are other people.
Hopefully, be somebody who doesn't have COVID like me.
Yeah, well, that won't last forever.
No.
But there is Brad put in the chat that there are other ways to find out about our trip, and that you can certainly get in touch with either one of us, and we'll talk to you more in depth about things that we did see. I'm able to discuss them, but I'm not going to discuss them with this group. I want to also tell you that if you go to the website for Clergy and Citizens Against Racism, check it out. If it's a group you'd like to belong to, please let us know. We meet once a month on the 3rd Thursday of the month, and it's usually either on Zoom or in person. We try to do it in person, but it's all faiths. We really deal with all issues of racism, and sometimes it's legislation that affects voting rights, things like that. So if you're interested in joining us, we'd love to have you. I want to impress, and Kathy can help maybe with this too. There's an enormous need in Israel. The American Jews and non-Jews have already sent $1 billion to Israel, and none of this is for bullets. This is all for humanitarian aid. This is for these 200,000 people that have had to be resettled. This is for medical services, and there is a huge need for funds. And if after you do some studying and listen to this and go to some of these programs, if you want to be able to make a gift, Brad, when I turn things back over to you, I'm sure he'll be glad to tell you how to make a donation to the Israel Emergency Campaign, which is it's separate from anything else. It's all the money is going to Israel, and none of it is going to bullets. I think I had some notes written down here. I think I've covered most of them. Are there any questions of me and Kathy before I turn it back over to Brad? Brad, take it away.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Marvin and Kathy for hosting this event, as well as Rabbi Sherry Grinsteiner and the Clergy and Citizens Against Racism. We really appreciate putting this program together. I'd like to also thank our speakers from Israel. I think that you guys all felt the same way as me, that it was very powerful. My name is Brad Kaplan. I am the Director of Principal Gifts here at the Federation. I've shared some information on the chat. I've shared my email address there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. So far in Richmond, we've raised over $2.1 million. That contributes to the $775 million raised by Jewish Federations of North America. I'd also like to say thanks for attending, everybody. And this is part 2 of our speaker series. We will have our last talk next week. It is going to go into humanitarian aid, and we are going to have a discussion about the humanitarian law with the claims waged against Israel by South Africa. We'll also have a discussion with the Anti-Defamation League with the difference between hate speech and free speech. This entire series is being put together by many leaders of our community: Richard November, Helen Horowitz, Tommy Bear, Nanette Shore, and Josh Goldberg. Finally, I wanted to remind people that Saturday, January 27th, is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the time to remember the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and other victims. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing many of you again next week.